Ashley and Joe, Kara, and Rennie, thank you. And thank the team who's really back at, we all want to thank Connie Portman. Everybody is going to the, Connie is back cooking right now. So Connie, we know you're in the kitchen. And this is, for those of you who are joining us up online this morning, this is our 40th birthday celebration. And I have a couple hellos to share with you. First and foremost, I wanted to say hello to all of you from Tracy Watson. Now, Tracy was our music director during the 80s and 90s, and Tracy said to say hello as I called him to invite him to come. And he said, "Oh, Marianne, I'm still doing that church thing." And I said, "Okay, you can do that church thing." And I also talked to Andre Martin. And Andre, he is in New Jersey. And Rennie and I were going to go get him and just say, "Come home," but he decided that, you know, that's where he lives now. But he also said to say hi to everyone. Another person who said to say hi to all of us is Reverend Eugene Sanders. Now you may be thinking, who is that? We don't recognize that name. Reverend Eugene Sanders was actually the pastor of the Central Church of the Nazarene who built this church in 1968. And I got a hold of him, thanks to Mary Taylor and Friends of Friends, and he was just so thrilled that I called him. And he said, "You know, I just tell your congregation, I'm so thrilled that it's still a church, that you're enjoying this wonderful church." And it made his heart feel very good. And he extended a birthday blessing to all of us. So as I hunted down over these past couple of months some of our history, I've created a handy-dandy handout, and it is in the foyer. And if those of you who are online would like a copy, please put a comment in the post, and we will make sure that you get it, to talk about how this church was literally physically built. It's quite interesting. It's quite a fascinating story. So I would invite you to pick up a copy. They are in the foyer on the left-hand side as you exit today. So it's, you know, a special time and a special place. And I couldn't help but notice that yesterday, of course, wasn't also a special time and a place in history. How many of you remember where you were when that final step was taken onto the moon? And you know, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, you know, they said, and I remember so clearly, we were sitting there watching it, and my mother said very loudly, "Looks like New Mexico to me." And it's still floating around on Facebook. I saw somebody post the other day, well, they weren't really on the moon. And you know, that night, it was so fascinating, because I went outside and I was like, really? There really was somebody up there on the moon. It was just so amazing. But I loved yesterday's Daily Word. I just loved it because it challenged us. It said, so, they put their footprint on the moon and changed the course of history. Where's your footprint? And I've pondered that as, you know, we're standing here today on this 40th birthday about where is our footprint individually and collectively, the footprint that we are going to make on the human existence. And you know, I thought to myself, so often we wish that we could have this one big moment, sort of like the astronauts or Paul falling off his horse at Damascus or Moses at the burning bush. But you know what? The reality of our spiritual journey is it's just, this is a big secret, daily. It isn't the one big moment. It isn't the one big happening. It's an everyday walking with God. And though the journey that we take spiritually, yes, maybe there may be some high points in our life. Certainly, you know, today is a high point in the life of our church. But it's about how we take those steps moment by moment, day to day. So we've been looking this month through the course of how we got here, the Unity Church of Christianity. And we began our story with the New Thought movement in the 1800s with Phineas P. Quimby and Mary Baker Eddy. Then last Sunday we looked at how unity itself was born with Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. And you know, one of the things I want to re-emphasize that I'm just really kind of grappling with in my own mind is the power of that initial movement. I'm talking about New Thought, of which religious science, divine science, Christian science, they all came kind of out of that beginning energy that we saw in Quimby. It was all about physical healing. The initial unity movement and all of its writings and all of its was about physical healing. Because as we found out last week, 1 in 7 people died of tuberculosis throughout the course of history until the 1950s. Now think about that. 1 in 7 people died of, they called it sometimes consumption or tuberculosis. And so what we see in the beginning of the New Thought movement, who had tuberculosis? Phineas P. Quimby. Who had tuberculosis? Mary Baker Eddy. Who had tuberculosis? Myrtle Fillmore herself. And so we see this strain of physical healing being very integral part of the unity movement from its foundation. Yet, things are changing. Things are morphing. As new medical science, discoveries are coming in. And also at the very same time as Charles and Myrtle were, unity was sort of developing in the early 1900s, we also see that Sigmund Freud and the whole idea of emotional and psychological starts coming into play. That when we talked about mental healing or mental energy, as Quimby would have talked about, Quimby would have seen it as psychological, emotional, all one big package. But over the course of time, we began to see that there was something about the way we processed and lived emotionally, lived and processed psychologically, that had a tone and tenor that was just a little bit different. And so what we've seen in unity over these years, and especially most recently, we've seen a lot of focus on, I'm going to call it, on the psychological, emotional aspects of healing. So in other words, it's sort of like, here's the central message of physical healing, but now we're seeing tentacles reach itself out into different aspects of healing. So a couple months back, we did a program on the 12 steps, a new booklet that Unity put out. Not too long ago, Unity put out another booklet called Coping, listen to the word, Coping with Cancer. It wasn't a book that said healing cancer. It said coping with cancer. So again, it's looking at the aspect of the emotional, of the psychological aspects. And so we see that there's sort of broadening of the unity message. Now, some may feel that that's a watering down of the unity message. That's also a possibility. But then I thought to myself, okay, let's go back. This is our 40th birthday. And as I walked across the door today, I love thresholds. You know that Celtic tradition of thresholds? So I'm standing at the door, and I'm unlocking it, and I say, I really want to focus on this threshold. Because it's a beginning and an end, isn't it? 40 years are behind me, and I'm walking into this consciousness, this energy. What are the footsteps that you and I, everybody here today, we're putting down? What is it that we are carrying forth? The unity message, this is all about this church, all about the movement we are a part of, all about this evolution of understanding of the power of spirit, the power of the mind, the power of truth and belief. What is it that we're doing, focusing on as we go forward into the years ahead? The first footstep I think we make, and it's a very important one. It is the core, I would say, of unity teachings. And that is the listening. You know, today, you and I all have the issue of being very distracted. Lots of times, more often than we care to be. There's some noise going on, even if it's not our noise, it's the person next to us. It's something is happening, some distraction is going on. And we struggle to find a place of true quiet, and we struggle to find a place of true quiet for any real length of time. So if unity is talking about going into the silence, if unity is talking about going into the depth, then we have to find maybe some new ways of connecting with that depth that may not be sitting in the silence for hours at a time or even 15, 20 minutes. How is it that we can begin to live in the world that we are in, using the tools that we have to deepen our spiritual journey? And one of the things that we've done is our 90-day process. Now, those of you who are on Facebook with us know that the church began the first Sunday in June. We began a 90-day process about posting some sort of spiritual quote that spoke to you. And here's the reason why. The reason is God speaks to us all the time. But what has happened is we become so involved in all the noise that's around us, we're not listening. Do you know how much effort it takes to tune out all the noise in your life? I remember going on sabbatical last July, and they said no Wi-Fi, and I was like, no Wi-Fi? Why am I here? And they said, oh, you're here for quiet prayer. But not that quiet. Not that much prayer. Oh my goodness, no Wi-Fi. And the noise. Cicadas are loud. Did you know that? There wasn't even any noise in the middle of the night. And I'm like, how am I supposed to get out of the noise? But the problem is, I think, we think listening for the still small voice of God is all about our ears. It is not about your ears. It is about your heart. It's about your soul listening deeply, listening so very intimately into the core and depths of us that it's challenging to find that space. So our Facebook idea was that we would start to become attuned to the times when something, as we were going about our day, would strike us. See, because there's a vibration, and we call it a resonance. You know, all of a sudden, we're walking along and minding our own business, reading something like, why did the Daily Word yesterday strike me? Millions of people read the Daily Word. Maybe none of them had the same visceral response I did, because it didn't strike them the same way. My soul was ready to hear that question. What is your footstep, Marianne? Where is your footstep in the human experience? And so as we begin to attune ourselves, there's no accidents, my friends. You are being touched and you are being talked to all the time. But sometimes it comes through music, and sometimes it comes through poetry, and sometimes it comes through other things other than hearing your mind speak. And as we've been posting, this is our 50th day of posting, it's just been really amazing the things that people are reading and the things that are speaking to people's hearts. Because I think the footstep we want to put down as a church and as the unity movement is to come back to those roots and say it is about the roots. It is about the depth that we are trying to get into our soul journey. And I thought to myself, not too long ago, I was out looking at the property. You know, you have to walk the property when you're a minister. You have to walk around the property and look at it. And I was noticing our beautiful Shumard oak tree. Now, there's a great story about that Shumard oak tree. We bought it about 8 or 9 years ago. It was a memorial gift for Joan Krager's father. And it also happens to be Joan Krager's birthday today. So we're celebrating your birthday, Joan. And when she bought this tree, it was a twig and there were 3 leaves on it. And she paid like $100 something. I'm like, really? For that? I got a broom at home we can put some leaves on it. And I'll never forget the woman at the nursery. She looked me straight in the eye and she says, this is important. You need to water this tree every day, and you need to water it at the root. Do not water it clear out in the garden someplace. Do not water it on the lawn. You need to water the taproot. She said, because the tree can only grow as tall as the taproot is deep. Now think about your spiritual journey. Your spirit can only grow as tall as your taproot can go deep. And that depth is going to require that you begin to attune your mind, your heart, your soul to that deeper listening. The deeper listening that disconnects us from the world around us in ways, shapes, and forms. Little ways while we're driving down the road, while we're in the shower, while we're doing something, and just to resonate with the fact that all around us, the vibration is speaking. And I think there's no greater place than nature itself that reaches out and touches us with a word or a phrase. And it says, come deeper into it. Why do things strike you as they do? Because it's a call and it's an invitation to come deeper. And so over the course of years, I've watched that little trig. I've watered it faithfully. And after a while, you kind of forget about it. It's growing. Okay, fine. And in this past spring, when I was out there, I went, oh my God. That tree is 20 to 30 feet high now. That little twig, I'm 5'4.5", maybe on a good day, was littler than me. And now it's this massive, beautiful tree. And what is so exciting about it is you know that taproot has grown deep and far because the tree is tall and straight. And because we've had so much rain this past spring, what's it also done? It has blossomed out. Now think about how that is in your own life. As you gain in the depth, as you gain in that understanding. We called it the universal Christ. We've been talking about that this whole past year, how we see everything and everyone, everything, everyone. There's no not them, not that, not this. It is all one in this Christ consciousness. As we deepen in that awareness and understanding, that taproot goes down and down and down. And what is the external expression? We grow up and up and up. The second thing this tree does, if we'd had a drought this spring, as opposed to flooding, the tree would have begun to send auxiliary branches out for nutrients, right? It's going to somehow have to write itself out and find out what it needs. And so here's the second thing. We need to listen, but then we need to live. We need to live in a world. See, we need to take that wisdom and we need to take that understanding. We need to take that peace. We need to take that conscious awareness into a world that, quite frankly, is not peaceful. It's a world that is very fragmented. It is a world that is angry. It is a world that's turned upside down in many ways. And so the frustration that we have is, all about them. But you see, it isn't out there at the end of the leaf where the real nurturing goes on. It's in the leaf and the root and the tree itself. And so here's the example I would use. And I'm sure it's an example that frustrates and challenges all of us. Not too long from now, we are all going to be asked to go to the polls. And I don't care how much information you have. You can you can watch all the TV shows, you can get information on all the topics and the debates and the people and all that, but at some point in time, you yourself and you alone will have to go and put an X in that box. Doesn't matter what all this other stuff is. What matters is, where are you? What are you drawing up from that taproot of wisdom? What are you drawing up of that taproot of understanding? What are you drawing up from that taproot that is deep within you? What are your core values? What are your beliefs? And when you vote or any decision that you make, is it in alignment with the beliefs? That's that canopy that spreads out to the world, that gives out of the life that comes from the deepening taproot. And of course, the third thing the tree does is plant seeds for the future. Won't be long for the tree will be shedding its leaves and will be turning colors and dropping all kinds of seeds. And that is what we're up to at this moment in time. You know, as we take that step and we plant our feet and we say, this is my personal experience that I am gifting into the world because I have been, and we collectively are gifting into the world because we are, this is that opportunity and that time to plant the seeds for the future. So the question is, what are those seeds? Are you planting seeds of anger and frustration and hate? The taproot isn't very deep. When the storms come through, that tree will just knock itself right on over. But you know, when that taproot is deep, when that core belief, that universal message that we have always shared, yes, at one point in time it was primarily focused on healing, on physical healing. Now it has grown. But the same core message continues. Emily Cady, Myrtle Fillmore, May Rowland, all these wonderful people that were part of my growing up in unity. They said the same thing over and over again. It's about the depth and the connection to spirit. And from the depth and the connection of spirit is something you and I have to work at. It doesn't happen overnight, once in a blue moon when we feel like it. It is a conscious, intentional effort to water every day. See, it didn't do me any good to take the hose out there and just soak that tree for hours at a time and then never water it again. It doesn't do you any good to read the daily word yesterday and never read it again for 20 or 30 years. It's a day-by-day listening. It's a day-by-day attunement. So, you know, as we look at the 40 years that this church has been, the healing light, the divine presence, the teachings that we've given, the seminars, the music, all the wonderful things that are a part, that are just resonant in these walls. You know, we talked about, I love this so much. You and I are the inheritors of almost 150 years of prayer. 150 years. When you call silent unity, they say, how can we pray with you? And you walk into a consciousness of intense prayer. Well, what about this building? Don't you think this paneling holds your prayer? Don't you think the consciousness of this space heard every word you said? Every word that was in your heart? You know, Pastor Sanders told me something. He said, you know, Marianne, when we were down on 13th in Denver, before we moved to 35th in Jamestown, we had to refurbish the church several times because the ground shifted. And he said, when we moved to 35th in Jamestown and we built that building, I made sure that the foundation of this church was double strong. And I thought, you know what? That's exactly what I'm talking about. The consciousness of this church is double strong. When we come here Sunday after Sunday, we add our consciousness to its consciousness. We add our prayers to its prayers. No matter how long or how short people have moved away, come back, gone away once again, we still are invited once again to be enfolded in those prayers. So as we kind of draw the line and say, we celebrate our 40th birthday, we have planted roots for the depth of new and expansive spiritual understanding. We have allowed that root to flourish, to grow, to prosper, and to bloom into the everyday working of our everyday life. And at the very same time, we've planted seeds for the future of people whom we may never know, to come to our doors, to connect with this message, and their life to be healed and blessed and changed. Thank you for joining me today, and God bless.